And we were going to discuss some of the recent developments of legal efforts to ban and limit expressions of Satanism. And originally, this live stream idea started out only like a week ago because some cunt in Oklahoma by the name of David Bullard, is a senator there, resubmitted a Ten Commandments bill, just like the one we saw in Arkansas, just like the one we saw prior to that in Oklahoma before, where the idea is that if you sign a Senate bill and pass it through law, then you set up a Ten Commandments monument on public property. And because you proclaimed that it's outside of Establishment Clause violations and other such things, because it's a private donation and it's been passed through law, that it's made legal. And this was interesting because this has already been done in Oklahoma. This has already been settled law. This bill had already been passed and already been deemed illegal by the Oklahoma Supreme Court. So for somebody to submit this again and to ask that the Ten Commandments monument be constructed again with no new arguments and no new basis for proclaiming its legality was really alarming to us. And we decided we put together a live stream about a week ago to discuss that issue. And then since then, we had these far more egregious violations of Iowa and Arizona looking through their lawmakers to pass laws that are directly meant to prohibit Satanists from expressing Satanism on any public property, in any public spaces, in any schools, that type of thing. And so we have now a multiplicity of these ridiculous issues to discuss. And I think we'll still start with Oklahoma. But in the meantime, I haven't caught up with you fellas generally very much, and you must see the news unfolding regarding these issues. So I'll kind of let you get your introductions out of the way and your preliminaries as to what you think about these things. I guess I'll start with you, Stu. Just kind of introduce yourself and let us know what topics might be burning on your mind as we deal with these three issues: Oklahoma, Iowa, and Arizona at this point.
I think I'll just initially speak to Arizona, just because that's where all of my legal, for the most part, activities have been, other than the Arkansas Baphomet. But it's interesting to me that this is happening now, because our initial push was, it's 7 years ago now, in 2016, when we did the invocation campaign, which was kind of, well, not kind of, that was my first legal action with TST. So I was kind of the first one to start a legal action for the Satanic Temple, kind of in-house. And then quickly I brought in Matt Kezhaya, because I realized there's no way I could do this alone. I couldn't handle it. It was outside of my legal expertise. And what happened in that case eventually is I found it to be not a legislative issue, but an administrative issue, which is why we didn't prevail on that case. And it's interesting to me that 7 years later, they make a bill to completely take a minority religion out of the public sphere, which is completely crazy to me. And I know that the arguments they're going to make, it's the same argument they're always going to make, is that it's not a real religion, and it's because they don't like it, or there's not enough people in it, that they're going to have to contend with, is the way they see it. So this bill essentially says, any type of public display, or I imagine invocation, putting up a Baphomet monument like we're attempting in Arkansas, anything like that, is now against the law. So what they're saying is the Establishment Clause no longer exists. They're saying in under the Establishment Clause, you're not allowed to either promote or you're not allowed to promote or disparage a religion. And this is essentially doing both. It's promoting their religion and disparaging ours, which flies in the face of the Constitution. And this is another big government Republican thing. The Republicans are the big government party, which is so funny that they claim the opposite. They want to say who has babies, how to worship, what you're allowed to do. They want the government to tell you all of these things. And from a philosophical perspective, I mean, clearly legally, I don't know what else to say other than it flies in the face of the Constitution. But there's this philosophical concept to it that I find interesting, because I always find that these, especially right wing Christians, so called Christians, they've created God in their own image, and you could tell because everything they hate is what they claim God hates. But they've taken it a step further in this, and that they essentially have made the founding forefathers in their own image, because they're dictating to the public what the forefathers would have done. And not only is it un-American, I find it to be blasphemous. They're claiming to speak for both God and the forefathers. It's kind of an interesting thing. And when it comes to modern Satanism, especially codified Satanism since the '60s with Anton LaVey and our version of Satanism, I mean that shit is as American as apple pie. So what they're doing is basically saying that this kind of newer religion, as far as the modern sense, we're gonna just not apply a basic constitutional right to this whole group of people that we know are here. They know we're here because clearly they're aware of what happened in 2016, and they're just saying these constitutional rights that are afforded to every American are no longer afforded to you, and somehow they think that's okay. So I don't know if it's going to pass. Usually, when these stupid ass bills come up, they don't pass. But what we have now is a group of people that don't have any respect for the rule of law. They have no respect for American institutions, American law, the Constitution. They're setting that shit all on fire. And you can, that's the zeitgeist of today, is they're doing it from top to bottom of our government. So who knows? Maybe it'll pass. So you see the caliber of the people in our legislature, and the bar is very, very low. They're not very bright people. They don't know the law. They shouldn't hold these positions, but this is where we are. So, if it passes, I'm sure there's going to be a test case somehow, and we're going to assert our rights, because what they're doing, that bill is essentially illegal. But these issues are getting more and more perilous, and I think the stakes are higher and higher. So that's my initial thought on this.
They clearly are. But let Matt introduce himself and give some initial thoughts as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Kezhaya. I serve as general counsel for TST. I'm the successor to Stu here. We have in Iowa, let me piggyback off of what Stu said. With regard to Arizona, that's exactly what they said at the hearing. They said, oh, well, this religion offends my religion, and therefore it should be stopped. The bill text in Arizona is very, very simple. I think I saw on Reddit that someone had counted it up. It's 25 words long, and it manages to violate 3 clauses of the First Amendment. What it prohibits is any form of representing or honoring Satan on public property in the state, which would preclude anyone from, for example, wearing a TST t-shirt in any public park of the state, any public school of the state. It goes much, much farther than precluding, for example, putting up Baphomet on Arizona Capitol grounds next to their Ten Commandments monument. It's a wide-ranging bill. Even more wide-ranging is what we see in Iowa, which, in addition to the text that I've already mentioned, they also criminalize any form of satanic practice or worship, which either involves ending of a life, so they're targeting our religious reproductive rights campaign, and the shedding of blood, whether human or animal. So any form of blood ritual is directly precluded. So whereas in Arizona, what they're saying is, oh, well, you can practice your religion in the comfort and privacy of your own home as you see fit. Iowa is taking that next step and saying, no, you can't. And in fact, it's going to be a crime. These are egregious issues that we're looking at here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to those, but just because this is where it started out with Oklahoma, let's just start with that, even though that one seems a little more obscure now, given the Arizona and Iowa bills. But the Oklahoma bill being advanced to, just resubmit a bill that's already been deemed illegal, to put a Ten Commandments monument on public grounds when not even 10 years ago, the Oklahoma Supreme Court said you need to take it down. When I first saw that bill, I was confused as to whether the politician who submitted it even knew the history of the prior bill that was deemed illegal. And I think that's an interesting question because that's the situation we're in now. We have flunkies for Christian nationalists in public office now who are signing their names to bill mill legislation, things they didn't author, that are just templates, and they're turning them in. They don't know what the history is. They don't know what the legal theory is. They don't know what the Constitution is. They don't even know what their office is supposed to do. And yet this guy turns in a bill, this David Bullard idiot turns in a bill already illegal, using the same language as the one that was deemed illegal, doesn't offer a new legal theory, doesn't offer testimony that would tell you anything that would make you reconsider. He simply resubmits something that's been deemed illegal. And that was what really got me wondering, is this a sanctionable offense? Is there no oversight to say that this goes too far? You have revealed yourself to be entirely incompetent and willing to waste public funds on superfluous personal crusades at this point, because I understand the concept that you want to have a real flexibility regarding it, and I agree with that, regarding opinions, regarding, the disposition of the law and when it should be reformed and when it shouldn't. But when something like this is so by rote and so devoid of any unique argument, and yet it's represented when the concept is that the Attorney General's office is going to cover these litigation efforts on the public's dime, you would think that an asshole like David Bullard would be terminated from his job. Is there any recourse of that type that you know of?
Well, if you were an attorney, just for example, and you were trying to, it's essentially kind of like a lateral appeal. It's like, oh well, we couldn't get through this judge, so we'll try to get it through the same thing with this other judge, right? That would be sanctionable and that would be frivolous. But I think when it comes to these legislatures, I mean, it's almost like incompetence, like aggressive incompetence has become so normal that it's like a shotgun. Like you said, it's a bill mill. They don't know the history. They don't understand these basic concepts. These are just random people that were elected to an office they don't understand. It's exactly like you said. As far as a recourse, I don't think there is. What do you think, Matt? Do you think there's any recourse to that, to doing knowingly unconstitutional bills?
The recourse is political.
Right. Yeah.
People need to be pissed off at the person for example, Arkansas. I foresee that we're going to win that case. We need to make a big old fucking deal about how Jason Rapert personally ensured that Satan would go up on Arkansas State Capitol grounds. It will kill his career. That is the recourse. Otherwise, no, you bring the suit. The suit's against, whatever government official is in charge of enforcing the statute, not the people who put it in place to begin with.
And they have immunity too.
Exactly. They have legislative immunity. Whole cloth. There's no two ways about it. And that extends all the way down to your local city, city council that breaks the law.
You mentioned Jason Rapert, and I think that offers interesting context to anybody who's listening. Rapert he's a former senator now from Arkansas, and after Oklahoma originally was made to take down their Ten Commandments monument because the Oklahoma Supreme Court deemed it illegal, and it was the same text in the same bill that's now being put forward, we saw that same bill pop up in Arkansas. And we know that the sponsoring senator who presented the bill in Arkansas didn't write it. His name was Jason Rapert, and he was another one signing his name to bill mill legislation. And we sued Arkansas because we offered our Baphomet monument and they rejected it. And they put up a Ten Commandments monument nonetheless in Jason Rapert's name. And when we were in depositions, I remember with both of you, I made clear that I wanted to get to the heart of the issue when it came to the legislation itself. I wanted to know who actually wrote the text of this legislation. And Rapert claimed immunity. He did not want it to be known what the editorial history of this bill was. And he claimed legislative immunity. And he got away with that insofar as this case goes. And I think all these guys will get away with concealing the editorial history of these bills from here on. But what we're dealing with is a situation in which we have lawmakers who don't understand the law, they don't understand the Constitution, they don't understand what their job is, and they're not even doing the work themselves. And more than that, they're not even obligated to tell us who's doing their work for them. So we have political interest groups. And in this case, I think political interest groups whose interest is in instantiating a theocratic coup. And I think if we knew who those organizations were by name and who exactly was authoring these bills that these guys are putting forward, we would see very clearly what their motivations are. They've probably spoken them openly, but we're not hearing that. They have their mindless flunkies doing this instead. And now these three bills pop up. We have another guy, like I said, in Oklahoma, presenting a Ten Commandments bill. And now we have these anti-Satanist bills. And I don't think any of these people who presented these anti-Satanist bills actually authored these either. But these bills are tactless and idiotic. When you look at bills like the Ten Commandments bill, like the Ten Commandments bill tries to make the argument that it is not a violation of the Establishment Clause because it will be a private donation. It serves a secular purpose because it speaks to history and heritage, that kind of thing. And then they just assume that other religious voices won't jump on board. But they try to keep their argument constitutional. These anti-Satanist bills don't do that. They don't pay any deference to constitutionality. And that's what makes me think that this has nothing to do with the Congressional Prayer Caucus or Liberty Council, but it's probably a little fuckhead like Jason Rapert, who is a mindless little follower who was part of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, and I think they probably penned the Ten Commandments bill. But I think Jason Rapert now has started his own Christian nationalist politicians group, and I have no evidence for this. I'm only speculating, but I think bills like the anti-Satanist bills are so stupid that they probably come from something like Jason Rapert's group. Like the cumulative IQ of his group, even with probably over a couple hundred people in it, has to be over under 65. I just wonder. What do you think of that?
What do you think?
I mean, do you think otherwise? Do you think the Congressional Prayer Caucus would really be so stupid as to write something as unconstitutional as the Iowa or Arizona anti-Satanist bills?
Well, this is what I'll say.
Let me interject on Iowa. It does have a lot of that same kind of, legislative findings that they're hoping will be found to be sufficiently constitutional. Arizona does not have that. I do want to point that out, but Stu, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was actually going to say something similar. So with this whole, this, what do they call it? Their blitzkrieg, Operation Blitz. It seems similar in that it's a bill mill, but what they did before seemed a lot more intelligent because they were trying to kind of cover up their unconstitutionality. They were trying to make these claims that what they were doing was still secular somehow, which was totally bogus. But on its face, I think regular people wouldn't, think much about it. But this is so brazen that I don't know if they're that emboldened or it's another group. I have no idea, but it's just so clearly unconstitutional just on its face that I think they're testing the waters, because if they can get away with this and they can pass these everywhere, then it's a theocratic state. Then the Establishment Clause no longer exists. Now we've given the states room to say this is the religion that's acceptable, this is the religion that isn't. So I think they're testing the waters with this.
This is something I want people to understand, though. This isn't one of those things where you can look at one of these bills and say, well, this is a real inconvenience for people who identify as Satanists. The ramifications of this are so broad and so all-encompassing that it breaks everything. If this were to pass and be upheld into law, and let me make clear, I was wrong previously. I thought Ducey was still the governor in Arizona, and I had forgotten that the election had taken place and he was out. So the bill in Arizona is not likely to pass. The governor there is likely going to have enough sense to veto it. In Iowa, I don't think that's necessarily the same. I think it might actually pass in Iowa, but I don't think even the most sympathetic court could find a way of upholding the Iowa bill thereafter. I mean, maybe even that's optimistic of me. But what is not optimistic and also is not hysterical or hyperbolic on my end is that if a bill like this goes into law and is upheld on the court by the courts, that breaks everything. The system is undone. This is no longer a democratic system that respects pluralism or religious liberty. And that's what I mean by saying that this is so clearly and flagrantly unconstitutional. That's the way it is. It changes everything. And at this point, you should know well enough that it doesn't even matter who we are at this point. When you have the government coming in and saying that certain religious representations are not okay, or certain religious symbolism, that is obviously outside of their purview. And I thought that this was shit that people didn't need explained to them. I thought this was basic elementary school level civics stuff. But I do see online people making comments like, well, what about a mass murderers after school club or a Hitler after school club or whatever, those kinds of things. And that's like, I would just draw the analogy of banning TV because there might be violent content or objectionable political content on it. You don't go to those outer symptomatic levels. You outlaw the criminal behavior. You can't just say that, to my mind, Satanism means this kind of criminal behavior, therefore I'm banning Satanism. Satanism doesn't mean the same thing to us as it does to superstitious evangelicals, and they can't dictate to us what it means. And if they're going to say that it means human sacrifice and murder, they don't go after our iconography. They go after murder. You know, the activities they think that we're involved in that are already illegal, that they don't need to legalize, but they can't go after our ability to use the cultural raw material of religious iconography and use it in any way we see fit. And I think for people to ask these questions on Twitter is one thing, but for lawmakers to be in office and not understand what a bizarre and egregious step that is just unconscionable.
Yeah, and to quote our friend Hollow, they were committing the crimes. We were playing D&D. And this is the thing, you know, oh, our religion offends you because of what you think we're doing. How many churches have been sold off at auctions because of the sexual abuse crimes? Like the fact that they can just sort of pin crimes on us versus what their majority religions have done, it's amazing. It's amazing how they've turned this around. And it's amazing that the public is falling for it, which is kind of the most disheartening thing to me, is I think if you put the First Amendment on a ballot, it would be voted out, because that's how this makes me feel when they do stuff like this. And the public's like, oh, well, that's okay, you know, whatever. Those people, they're bad anyway, right? But that's what freaks me out the most, is that I think that a lot of the public is on board with stuff like this.
From the chat, somebody asks, are they trying to define religion to exclude Satanism or anything that isn't Christianity? And I would like to say they are narrowing in on Satanism, but even that is so broad that eventually that's going to get you to anything that isn't Christianity, because that's really their starting point. Like, they look at the fact that we're non-theistic and they want to define non-theistic religions as not being religions, ignoring Buddhism, ignoring Jainism, ignoring Confucianism, ignoring any of the philosophies that have been recognized as religions while being non-theistic. So that already is excluding other religious voices. But it's not simply that they're offended by Satanism. They are offended by Satanism, and they want to believe that Satanists are doing what they do simply as a calculated insult against them. But if they're going to be placing their subjective values on people's activities, certainly they're going to be emboldened to cut other people out of the picture too. They really want to advance their brand of religious liberty to mean that they have an exclusive forum on public grounds to proselytize to other people. And we see that when we try to open up after school clubs and we try to do whatever we do, they claim that we're targeting people and there's no reason we have to do this out on public grounds, ignoring the fact that we do this in the name of pluralism. When we go out on public grounds, we do it because there's other religious representation. When we go into the schools, we do it to offer an alternative. And then they look at that and claim that we're simply targeting them. And therefore, it's also hate speech, and that it's also not religious due to that. Like, we couldn't actually have a religious adherence to pluralism and diversity and these types of things that we champion. And I think we need to look at this as an attack to any alternative religion, alternative to Christianity, and not just an attack on Satanism, even though now they contextualize it by narrowly focusing it on Satanism. Do you feel the same way?
I would add.
Go ahead, Stu.
I would just add that I think in the bigger picture, to answer the question, it's directly targeting Satanism. But I think in the bigger picture, what's happening is you've got groups of people, or a group of people, that are trying to define what a real American is. And you can see this in the way they talk about immigration, in the way they talk about all kinds of different aspects, like, the LGBT community. So what they're doing is there is one real American, and it is a white, suburban, Christian, very narrow, specific milquetoast status quo American, and everyone else is an outsider. And what they're trying to do is kind of define this in these various kinds of legislations so that they can maintain complete control over what everyone's doing. So I think this is one aspect of a much bigger picture. But yeah, it's essentially a roundabout way of attacking pluralism, and saying this isn't a pluralist country, this is a Christian country, and this is the kind of their jumping off point. I think this is going to have a lot more ramifications if anything like this passes. And I agree with Lucien in that it undoes everything if this were to prevail in the courts.
What are your thoughts, Matt? Do you think this would be confined to Satanism for very long, or how immediately do you think this would be a problem that poisons everything?
Immediately. In Iowa, they're already there. The bill text explicitly states, I'm looking at the legislative findings, paragraph 3 says, the General Assembly finds that good and evil exists. Skipping to the bottom, the Iowa government, quote, is a state government that depends upon God, capital G God, for continued blessings. They are already saying that Christianity is the state preferred religion, but also Satan, being the exact opposite of Christianity in their mind, is therefore not only not a religion, but they explicitly state that they do not recommend Satanism. So, we're already there, y'all.
It both promotes and disparages religion in the same sentence. So, yeah, it violates every.
Is there any sanctionable offense there? I mean, arguably, they're defaming us from public office. And the thing about the Iowa thing that really disturbs me is that it looks like in Iowa, the lengthier bill, it looks like they're trying to define what Satanism is by including things about human sacrifice and things like that. And then they're trying to prevent us from being able to correct the record, to be able to speak in our own voice, to be able to say, no, this is what we actually stand for. This is what this actually means. This is what it is to us. They're demanding the right from public office to define who we are and then to silence us from being able to say in our own voice who we are. And to me, that's really fucking disturbing.
We've seen this before, y'all. The First Amendment did not come from nowhere. The European experience was exactly what we are looking at precisely right now. What we need to do is explain to the world abroad that we've been through this shit. It goes down a very, very dark path, a very, very chaotic path, one that society all came together at the founding of this nation and said, we are not going to go down that path ever again. It's not enough to say that it's unconstitutional. You have to explain the background, the historical why. You know, this old-timey notion of if you're not a member of the church, you're not a member of the community is no longer a thing here, and for good reason. That's really what we should be focusing our discussion on.
So why do you think the Iowa bill is so sparse and the Arizona bill is more fleshed out, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around. And both of these, I watched some of the Arizona, hearing or whatever at the committee level. They explicitly pointed to the Iowa display. Basically, this is all just, a legislative victim blaming because we were dressed too cute on that one cold January day that what's his name decided to go break down the display.
We were just too cute. It's been the problem the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think in Iowa, though, it might pass, even though it's sparse, 25 words, clearly unconstitutional. Their governor seems hopelessly stupid. Their Senate is also hopelessly stupid. And I think we're just in a situation now where we have people this stupid and this incompetent in public office, and there's this little oversight and this little of concern amongst the public. And really, when I get on a public broadcast like this, I try not to denigrate the public and the general activist left as much as I generally do in the background when I'm kicking shit and punching holes in the wall when I see dumb things like this. But when I get online and I see people doing nothing but crying about what comedians said that hurt their feelings or what Bill Maher said because they insist on watching him just to get pissed off, and that they don't even pay attention when in Arizona and in Iowa they're trying to overthrow the Constitution and bring that to the judiciary. That really irritates me and disgusts me overall. But I will say that I am pleased to see that different groups do seem to be making commentary about this. Just today, Fire posted a video that they made about how unconstitutional these attempts to limit Satanism are. And I'm glad they noticed. I know Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, they're writing an article about it. I was reached out to by them just yesterday. So I think this is catching people's attention finally. But I think this is just so serious. I think everybody should know about this. It's not often I say that necessarily about things we're doing, even though we're doing them and I feel that they're really important to us. I don't necessarily feel that people are remiss if they miss it, but this one goes too far. And I think the Christian nationalists have overplayed their hand. And if anybody was in any doubt as to whether or not they were trying to instigate a theocratic coup, this is it. This is arguably a coup attempt. This is going too far. This is an attempt by legislative authority to overthrow basic constitutional premises. And it's not enough just to bat it aside and say, okay, this doesn't pass, we're through it. But I think this really calls into question whether or not there should be better qualifying standards for our politicians, or more than just posing the question as to whether we want to vote them back into office after they do something as stupid as this. I really do think these should be sanctionable offenses, but maybe that's outside the purview of this discussion. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll just reemphasize there is no legal mechanism to sanction a legislator for forwarding, putting up some stupid ass bill or voting for said stupid ass bill. This is what politicians do. They get on their soapbox and they make a loud noise and they hope that someone pays attention to them. This is the nature of the beast. So there won't be any sanction. The sanction is to point at them and laugh at them and get everyone to point and laugh at them.
That's the thing. I think everybody should be more vocal about this and let it be clear that this is a serious issue. Somebody from chat says, how should individual Satanists living in areas targeted by proposed anti-Satanist bills respond to attacks on their rights? And this is something I'm almost reticent to talk about, because if we're getting to the point where they start illegalizing us, well, we're going to be illegal. And then the things we do start being illegal, which kind of close doors for us and kind of open doors for us too.
Well,
and I mean, maybe it's better I let the attorney speak at that point.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on I think it's always a risk assessment. I mean, I can't even believe we're talking about this, where there's bills that could potentially make it illegal to wear satanic imagery in a public space. Or, that's insane to me. I cannot imagine. I really cannot imagine a law enforcement officer enforcing that. What's a law? Imagine a law enforcement officer, a police officer, is like, I think that T-shirt is illegal. I'm going to put this guy in a police car. Like, I can't imagine it right now, but if this passes, I don't know.
To interject, that will 1000% happen. People get fucking arrested falsely for making speech that cops don't like. A friend of mine down in Arkansas had a case where a guy screamed "fuck you" at a cop who, just as an outsider to a cop interaction, screams "fuck you" at a cop and gets arrested.
That's totally different, though. It's totally different. This
cop
is like
got offended.
This is like a "fuck the draft" T-shirt, like the old heckler's veto, right? I mean,
"Fuck the draft" was a very famous First Amendment case. Someone got in trouble for wearing the shirt "fuck the draft." That's how we know about it.
Yeah, but also that was so long ago. I don't think law enforcement officers are going to enforce this. I mean, maybe I see what they do. I've worked around cops for a long time, and it's just like, I can't. Half of them probably have the same goddamn T-shirt. It's like,
possibly.
They have real crimes.
There's different cops in different places. I've met some dick cops.
I've met all kinds, but I mean, if it were me and this were to pass, and this might be me, is I would get everyone from the metal show to go walk outside in a public space with a T-shirt and see what fucking hell you can raise. But again, if you don't want to get yourself arrested, don't go to protests, don't do all of these things, and that's fine too. It's just,
well, there was the issue one time where, in Boston, or another place where we wanted to give an invocation before the city council meetings. They then started claiming that the prayers that were being given at the city council meetings weren't official, and that it just so happened that a guy was getting up there and giving a prayer. Didn't matter that they put him on the schedule or whatever. And we like to work within the system when the system is reasonable and the law is on our side, which for the most part it is. So why wouldn't we? Why would we get ourselves in trouble? But when they codify ridiculous rules like that, then they're simply inviting people to speak before their sessions, by saying, like, this is just something people do at random. So then it's like, that's an invitation for one of us just to take the stage, and just go. And of course, then we'd probably get arrested or whatever, but we'd have to fight it. And, they would have the more difficult time, I would think, because they had already made that argument, right? And that's the situation I feel like I'm trying to speak around. Those are the types of situations I'm trying to speak around when somebody asks a question about what do we do in states where they're targeting Satanists with these anti-Satanist bills. And I feel like, well, there's the potential that we'd be legalized in such ways where we would start doing activities like that at the very
Exactly.
least,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
that's standard nonviolent protest shit.
Exactly.
You know?
It's another form of protest, and I think it's such a blatantly unconstitutional law. Like I would be that's the kind of thing I would be inclined to get myself arrested for, because it's like what are they going to do? Go to a metal show and arrest everyone for wearing the wrong T-shirt? I mean, it's so fucking absurd to think about this being enforced.
It'll get enforced. I will be the first to say it. They're not trying to pass this shit for nothing, you know. They're not just like uh making noise just to see what happens. They intend to follow through with it. This is a true threat. But, you know, to go back to
What are your feelings, honestly, about how this survives in the courts? I know we've had really stupid rulings from really incompetent judges abusing standards of standing and all of that. But this does not give them anything to work with. And do you think even the worst Trump appointee is going to feel confident upholding one of these idiotic, incompetent anti-Satanist bills?
I don't see how a judge straight facedly does it on the one hand. On the other hand, allow me to remind y'all that Roe v. Wade just went away. That shit didn't come from a vacuum either. It started
right.
by passing a whole bunch of unconstitutional shit and just see what happens. And eventually stuff started sticking and they figured it out.
And I do agree with you. Like there's stuff that's been prosecuted in other states than, you know, outside of the Southwest, which is my experience, that I thought was fucking crazy. But if you think about it, you have to have a cop arrest someone, then you have to have a prosecutor issue it and decide to prosecute it. Then you have to have a judge find them guilty and sentence. Like somewhere along the chain, oftentimes someone's like, no, we're not enforcing this. This is absurd. But I don't live in the South, so I can't speak to what might happen there. And, you know, it's like this country is turned into like 4 different countries.
Here's an interesting question from the chat. If these bills pass, could I be arrested for dropping my child off at school in the Satan wagon? And in parentheses, it says a car with TST bumper stickers. And that might seem like a superfluous thing to worry about. Like, I have TST bumper stickers on my car. But yeah, you pull up in a school parking lot. I mean, that's against the law, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually think that would be more of a danger than, because a lot of arrests start with a traffic stop, just because this is a car obsessed country, right? And everyone's driving, and if you've got a bumper sticker that's essentially illegal once you go on public property, I do think that would be a legitimate like concern, actually.
The car being on the public road is, you know, the presumably the TSC bumper stickers are representing or honoring Satan. So
yeah,
checks that box. The public road is pursuant to a public easement, so it's public property. It checks that box. There's only 2 elements in the statute.
The other problem is it would create a lot of pretext stops. So they could stop you because you have the wrong bumper sticker. I can't even believe we're talking
about
it. Or
they thought it was a pentagram.
Or and then all of a sudden,
or they didn't recognize the symbol, and you know what? That could represent Satan.
And then the next thing you know, they're searching your car. They find something, they smell something, they see something, and then you're in trouble for that, right? So that's why I got to a point where I'm never going to put a bumper sticker on my car again, because I don't want to give anybody a pretext stop reason, and this would certainly be that.
I like how Stu assumes that inevitably we have other illegal shit in our car that's only going to be revealed from.
I'm not going to assume you don't.
Right.
On
a big enough class of people, someone's going to have some shit that a cop thinks is illegal.
Well, you know, weed is mostly what I was thinking of. In a lot of states, it's still illegal. It's still, you know, I happen to live in a civilized state when it comes to that, but not everyone does. I'm not thinking like a human head or a human sacrifice in the seed, but maybe some weed could get you some problems.
As most of us do.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the one thing I would really like to make clear to people is that this is a direct assault on freedom of thought, freedom of conscience. It's, you know, our ability to be able to look at these biblical stories and say that we think a more productive narrative is the one from the Miltonian context, the Satan as a hero, a rebel against authority, and that the other one builds up this kind of fundamental premise that upholds autocracy, in that we have the better kind of socio-political context, the better kind of mythological framework for working within a diverse pluralistic society. Our exposure to Christianity was maybe different from other people's. Maybe we just tend to see it in the way that the Westboro Baptist Church does, except unlike them, we think it's disgusting, depraved, and we want nothing to do with it, but we feel that their theology is generally correct as to what the will of their God is that they represent, and they act upon those impulses, and we don't want anything to do with that tribe. And we actually have people in government telling us that we can't do that. And for anybody to think for a moment that that isn't entirely insane, and that that isn't the most invasive of governmental policies to put forward, is absolutely deranged and demented and idiotic, and should absolutely migrate immediately to Iran or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia to work in a more amenable society to their needs. I think I just get on these things and I feel like I can't express it enough, or floridly enough, or poetically enough to make people realize it, or get worked up enough about how serious this is. And I don't know how to more explicitly put out the battle call, or let people know that these are where the lines are drawn, and if you don't take action now, that this all becomes undone. But there's also that lingering question of what can we do? And it doesn't seem like at this point there's as much recourse as I would like. And I feel like there's so much to fix: people's perceptions, people's education, the political system, just a lot of assumptions people make. And I don't know. I'll look to you guys for some answers on that, and hope that you have any. But it becomes pretty. I begin to feel pretty desperate and pretty pessimistic in some ways.
Well, I think Matt and I, we're both lawyers, so not only do we deal with worst case scenarios and particularly fight uphill battles, I also think, the concept of hope is like, I do think, I like to think that reasonable minds will prevail. It's just getting harder and harder to think that way, just because there's so much of this kind of stuff that doesn't just apply to us. It applies to a lot of other people that might not be in this exact situation. But let's see what happens. Let's see what happens with these bills, and we'll take. And I like to try to operate in the reality that we're in, not the reality that we hope for or could happen. So to me, I'm always just like, let's see what happens, and we'll take it from there. But things have changed significantly since we started this.
I'm the same way. I like to be in the reality we're in, but at a certain point, it feels like we're playing Russian roulette, and it's like we have somebody spinning the chambers and then putting it to their head, pulling the trigger. Nothing happens, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that's what happens when I pull the trigger," and they assume that they can keep playing, and they're never going to blow their head off. And I feel like that's kind of the American situation right now. That's what happens when I pull the trigger, and they assume that we keep pretending that this egregious shit is never going to go anywhere, and this is never going to happen, and the coup is never going to make itself real. But at some point, it is.
Yeah, I didn't say I had hope.
Don't stop it.
What do you think, Matt?
I struggle with it because, I, for all my faults being a lawyer, I am still an optimist, and I do still like to think that, we're seeing something of a little bit of a backslide, relative to, for example, the founding era when Enlightenment values were in. But, we're not We're not back before then. You know what I mean? Like that ground has not been lost. People are still I I see plenty of people upset about this shit in my viewings of the internet, social media and whatnot. They're not all Satanists. People understand once you start targeting a particular religion, you know, those tools work real well against other religions too. And I think most people have a good enough understanding of history that back when, pre immediately before the First Amendment, when the Catholics and the Protestants were killing each other in the streets, we don't want to go back to that. And maybe we just need to be a little bit louder about, hey, this is where this leads to third parties, not just in our own safe spaces.
I think it all became untenable when we started dealing with so many politicians who don't believe in evolution. Honestly, to get deeply philosophical about it, I think they are also incapable of seeing the complexity of some of the legal structure we have now and what made it relevant and important and why it's stabilized societies the way it has, to the point where they think that they can put forward an elevated position for a particular religion in complete contradiction to all of history, or at least all of civilized history, and be so ignorant as to that history that brought us to the place where we have these religious liberty laws that kind of set all of this aside, because we fought wars over this for centuries, and it's idiotic. It's unproductive. It just causes a lot of waste and destruction. And that's why we really left a lot of latitude for people to define themselves on their own terms, find their own ways religiously, and not allow the government to intervene on anything like this. And I think people are just completely unaware of that at this point, and they feel like they can make these from top-down mandates of the most basic perceptions of individual human minds, and that has never worked throughout all of this time, and they're just going back to that. And I just keep coming back to, how can we have more productive and competent politicians? But I just feel like that's just a bigger question than one that we can answer. I mean, there's so much wrong here at the point where we start having anti-Satanist bills actually proposed.
I'm one of the many dudes that's like obsessed with the Roman Empire. And I think the reason I can smile about this is the same shit that's been going on forever. Like, it's never been different. It's never ever been different. And I think the lives that we've led in the recent times is actually probably better than it's ever been. But this is a backslide. And I'm like, man, there's always a backslide. It never just keeps going forward. It's always a backslide, and horrible things have to happen before we learn again, and then there'll be another backslide. So from the big picture, I'm just kind of like, here we fucking go again. Like, I think this is worse than what happened in the Satanic Panic, is actual anti-bills, state bills that are targeting us specifically. I don't think that ever happened in the 80s and 90s.
It's because we didn't really exist in the 80s. Everything was too underground. There was no, that's the pro and the con. You organize, you become more visible, but the con is you become a lot more targetable too.
Yeah.
So
we're no longer an abstraction. It's no longer an abstraction.
But you can look at backsliding throughout history since the Enlightenment, since the 17th century. You can see that there's been like data points at which people always thought there was a backsliding into the Dark Ages, and it didn't come to be.
Right.
But you will also see that it didn't come to be because there was some furious backlash from certain people and certain groups who made sure to keep shit on track and in line. In this time, it's fucking us. We're on the front lines, and we have to do it. And they're targeting us. And if they get through that barrier, it's bad for everybody. And everybody should realize that right now. But right now, We are the ones on the front lines. We need to be paying attention to the news. We might not have the clearest battle plan as of right now, but you can be sure we're going to fight it from start to finish. And if any of these bills are passed, we are certainly immediately going to go into litigation on this, and we have a strong positioning there. And we will go the legal route for as long as we can and as hard as we can. And we will just do everything we can. And people just need to keep paying attention. They need to pay attention to the news. They need to pay attention to what we're doing. Pay attention, I guess, to our social media and what we're saying about how these things progress and work out. Watch the hearings, write to your politicians when relevant, make comments when those are relevant too, and correct people of their stupidity, because a lot of people now are repeating ignorant talking points about us as though they're general knowledge, which are entirely untrue. Like, how many times do I see people saying that we admit ourselves we're not a religion, when in reality, they don't understand what we mean by being non-theistic, that kind of thing. These really are worth correcting people on. Even little shit like this is worth doing. Getting into the discussions, getting into the battle, writing letters to editors and things like that, those are worth doing. Like, I think we would have never gotten along as quickly as we did. We wouldn't have experienced the growth that we had if it weren't for the internet phenomenon of comments. When people first wrote comments about the Satanic Temple, when there were articles about the Satanic Temple, or when people would first write articles, the best we could hope to get from them were that they would say, you might not like them, but their rights are these. And we would be happy with that. And then we started seeing floods of comments in some of the articles saying, not only are those their rights, but we believe their ethical values are higher than most too, and we support them more generally as well. And I think that emboldened authors of other pieces to say the same things. And then it turned into the whole culture war thing that we are now. And I think, people are often silent when it comes to these things because they see no hope in it. But it's not true. The Russians know that they just need to throw out a few bots sometimes to change the whole dialogue. And we just need a few supporters to actually say a few words sometimes. And that might make all the difference in some places.
I agree with you. I think the best thing every Satanist can do is just set the record straight when people ask. I mean, to me, that's been effective, where people throw out some concept or some misconception and just correct them. It's basic, but that stuff spreads where they're like, oh, I talked to one of them and it's actually not like that. I think that's more important almost than anything else you can do. Like even protest to a certain degree is just set the record straight when you can, because I mean, you're right. On the comment sections, I've seen a lot of support for people that have nothing to do with us. And that's the thing that gives me the most hope, is when I see people that don't even really know what we're about, but they understand the concept and the danger of this kind of legislation. And I just try to hold on to that. And then when the time comes, we're going to fight it, because that's what we've always done. But it's getting more and more daunting as time goes on.
Somebody from the chat says, for well-known Satanists like Lucien, for example, how bad and dangerous could things get? Not at all. I don't know. What do you guys think?
On the text of these bills, nothing, in of itself, but you'll probably. I had a client who I got out of jail, and he was like hounded by the cops because they're looking for any reason to arrest him. So, if you are a locally well-known Satanist and you have a bill like this going on, you probably will be targeted by the police. If not because of this bill, then, maybe they're looking for something else. It's persecution. That's what we're looking at here. That's the beginning of it.
Well, worse than that, I look at this and I say that, the more they do these kinds of things, the more they advertise to their base that they're cheering each other on for attacking us. And I worry that it emboldens the people who are inclined towards violence, they know they have no mental capacity to debate people, and they want to make a name for themselves. Like the fuckhead who drove down from Mississippi to Iowa to destroy the Iowa display in the Capitol that our congregation put up during Christmas time. I think he just wanted to be glorified by as a hero by some of these people. And I think when they're passing bills like that, when they're doing these things, when they're grandstanding against us, they're saying to a certain brand of idiot that it's okay to attack us and that there'll be heroes for doing so. And that is really a concern. And I mention that because even though I encourage people to speak out in comments and things like that, I also encourage people to measure their safety standards within their own community and make sure that they're looking out for themselves first and foremost, looking out for their careers, because we know that a job's not really allowed to fire you for being a Satanist, but they can find another reason if they don't like you for being a Satanist. And, you know, we've had people come and attack our headquarters, and surely they thought they would get nothing but applause for that. And it is a scary environment they put us in when they directly target us by making bills like this. And it's another thing that infuriates me, that we don't have some kind of officiating body to go to and say that this is irresponsible, this is dumb, this puts us in danger, it's unconstitutional, it wastes public funds, and this is not at all what we've ever been about. You know, what can you fix from this? And that just isn't available to us. But I do worry, especially running up to in an election year. I do worry that things will get worse before they get better.
And I think I think the worst part about all this is it emboldens potentially dangerous people. I think I'm more concerned about that than getting arrested. Is it emboldens people because now the government has said it's open reign, it's open season on this specific group of people, is what the legislature is saying. That concerns me more than law enforcement and getting arrested in the justice system, is who it emboldens. That's
Yeah,
where I think
there's a lot of questions about visible satanic tattoos. And I think I can answer that one. Like, if you have visible satanic tattoos in a public place and one of these bills passed, yeah, you could be arrested. It gets back to Stu's idea of what a cop is actually going to do and what they're going to ignore. But I feel like that falls within public expressions of Satanism or satanic worship or veneration within a public space, and that would be illegal at that point. That's how stupid this bill is. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but having a visible satanic tattoo would apply.
It is any other method of representing or honoring Satan. And you'd have to hide it. Otherwise, it is displayed on public property in the state. Any sideway or a sidewalk, street, public building, those are all public property. Go ahead.
I just can't imagine it. And maybe I'm wrong, but I really have a hard time imagining this stuff being enforced.
You want to know why? Because I would personally sue the shit out of that cop into fucking bankruptcy. That's a 1983
exactly.
suit.
It's
Under colored state law, they are breaking the Constitution. And I find it very, very, very unlikely that even one of these Federalist assholes would vote against us.
To be honest, though, the bill passes and they in Iowa, because we don't really think it'll pass in Arizona now, given the governor. But in Iowa, if it passes and you're concerned about your tattoo, I honestly think this would be short-lived. And I think if they were going to do something this stupid, like, I could see us providing you the satanic shirt to go to the Capitol. Or, if you've already got your tattoo, fine. But I think in a situation like that, I'm going to be with you and we're all going to get fucking arrested. And that's going to be a bigger case than you getting picked up for your tattoo alone.
Also, if there's a kind of cop that's going to arrest you for that, they're not going to even recognize it as satanic. what it, like, a Leviathan cross or a sigil of Lucifer or whatever, like unless it says like I love Satan.
Right. I bet there would be a lot of false positives on that one. And that's why I think this could possibly get through the courts. I think even the dumbest Trump appointee, would have to be going through some of the arguments before finally a couple of their synapses would start firing and they'd say, all right, this can't work.
Well, someone asked, I want to mention, so we passed over one of the questions about being a public school teacher with an inverted pentacle. Say it's pagan, say it's Wiccan. That's one of those potential false positive things where it's like, just say it's not satanic.
Yeah, who's to say? Who's to say? Right.
What the fuck are they going to do?
Then we just get back to the question of who's to say that Satanism means human sacrifice and cruelty? Like, it's just that's the point here. Like, when do you start legislating these basic claims of conscience? And it's insane. It's absurd. I mean, I'm hopeful that this is just a ridiculous little stretch of time we're going through right here.
That's my hope. That's why I'm a little, if I sound any flippant about this, I'm really hoping this is a blip on the radar because it's so outlandish. But again, I could be wrong.
It is so stupid, though, that I think that fucking idiot Jason Rapert is, he's trying to be like another congressional prayer caucus. He's like the idiot tag along who tries to see what the big kids are doing and then act like one of them. And I do feel like this is one of those instances where he's trying to pretend he's one of the big kids and that he understands how this shit works. And he tried to make model legislation because I don't know who would be stupid enough to put together a template like this and actually try to get it to go. I was giving it the credit of being something like a bold move from the Congressional Prayer Caucus or whatever. But when I look at it, it's just so stupid. It could be so much better. They could have tried to massage it in other ways. They could have tried to aim at periphery things that they think we're dependent on, but that would exclude us. That's the usual kind of method of like the Liberty Council or the Congressional Prayer Caucus or whatever. But this is so dumb that I think it comes from somebody as ignorant as Rapert. Like, I would be impressed if I would be impressed to find anybody stupider than Rapert. I don't know. I mean, there might be some. I mean, these people putting their name to it are arguably stupider than him, but we'll see. I would just like to know where this actually came from. The Arizona bill, the Iowa bill. Who was the idiot? Who was the idiot? And anybody who signed their name to it, they are not qualified for their job. I think even the abstaining votes should be kicked out of office because there is a right answer to this one. Is this legal? Isn't, should this pass? Should this not? That's not a subjective question. This is clearly unconstitutional and clearly ignorant. This clearly goes beyond the pale. So even to abstain and say, I don't know, is just raw incompetence in my mind. That doesn't save you in Arizona.
Doesn't save you. Raw incompetence, aggressive incompetence. That's what this country's built on.
Well, I mean, it's gotten us this far.
Yeah.
In the chat, it says, doesn't the Iowa bill outlaw Christianity because they believe in real Satan? And I guess it would if they mentioned Satan, if there was representations of Satan. I guess they couldn't denigrate Satan because they couldn't mention Satan.
Well, I think it has to do with the veneration of Satan, not the belief.
No. The statutory text is that it doesn't outlaw it. Would arguably, and I don't think any judge would buy this, but arguably it would require the state to cease recognizing organizations or individuals who refer to Satan as part of the organization or individual's religious practice. So, any tax exemptions that the state gives to any Christian church, that seems like a pretty good taxpayer bill to bring up, or taxpayer suit.
Well,
that's a good point. But they don't think that far ahead.
No, because no judge would buy it. Because obviously the purpose of this act is to outlaw Satanism, not outlaw
Yeah,
Christianity.
they're like this
Explicitly
clearly was a
say
bill to
this is going to be a
discriminate.
Christian state.
God, what has that become? I feel like it's been the last 7 years. That's what I meant to say about the aggressive incompetence. It's been the last 7 years where, before that, even reasonable minds could disagree on things and they would come to the conclusion like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this. But that's gone out the window. Like, it doesn't matter how absurd, how illegal, how incompetent. They're just like, let's go with this because it's going to hurt someone we don't like. That's the entire platform, is how can we hurt the most people the most efficiently? That's been the right-wing platform for at least a decade, if not longer.
Well, fellows, I think we've covered those bills, and I guess the bottom line is like we really have to see what happens before we really know what our attack plan is.
Yeah.
But be sure there are several different ways we can go about this, depending on how things play out. And however they play out, if it if it's not a done deal and goes away, we will certainly be active in every bit of this. And, yeah, either of these bills pass, we'll immediately be into litigation. And don't you fear about that. We will never back away from it. And like I said, for your own part, engage or whatever else. But I'll leave it to you guys to give the last word on what you think are the important takeaways or what the objectives really are here for us. I'll start with you, Matt, being that I'm just kind of leading the talk here.
I think the big takeaway is one of, if not the first question, what do we Satanists in states that are trying to outlaw Satanism, what do we do? What you do is you be out fucking loud, proud, and good to people. That is the first thing you should do. The second thing you should do is call your state representative, both senator and state senator and state rep. They need to know about this shit, and they need to know that they need to vote against it. And, summarize basically what I said earlier. This goes down a very dark path. It doesn't end with Satanists. So those are the two, I think, biggest takeaways. And number three, wear your damn TST t-shirt out in goddamn public while you can.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree on the loud and proud thing. I always tell people, like, of course, be aware of your safety considerations and everything else. But the more you can do it, the better off it is. And honestly, don't let it slide when people say that you admit you're not a religion. Like, correct people on that. Well, if people are saying non-theistic religion isn't a religion, let them know that's an ignorant take. We're not the only. We didn't invent non-theistic religion. Let them know that this is your religion and that's what it is. Even if that's all you say, that's good enough. If you're in there just saying like, no, I religiously adhere to this. This is my religion. That's what it is. It takes away from that whole perception that this is just a few people saying this as a legal ploy to exercise religious liberty rights where we have no right to. I think it's important that people realize that we're all out there, we're all here, and regardless of what they think of me, lawyers, or anybody else, that this is a community for a lot of people, and this is what they identify with, and really nobody does have a right to question or limit that. I'll let you get the final word, Stu.
Well, I think I agree with everything you guys said, and I've been saying this for a long time. Is our religion has a lot of pro-social values, and I think leading by example is kind of the best thing you can do. Is demonstrate that we're not the enemies of religion. We are religion. I've been beating that drum for a long time, and I think it still holds true that the more people that and you talk about your religion in a reasonable and kind way, that spreads. That really spreads. And I think as just any person that's dealing with this, like I see a lot of third-party people that don't know or about that are in support of our rights. And I think the best way to keep that going is just continue to be a good person under the like you gentlemen said, loud and proud. We're Satanists and we're your friends. And I think the more of this there are that are acting in a good way and that explain to people who have it wrong the more and more times that happens, the more people will stand up for our rights and therefore their own. And I think they'll understand that. So that's kind of how I feel about what any Satanist can do.
All right. Well, it was lovely chatting with you fellows. You the man, Johnny. And I guess I'll see you soon.